The two statements that have struck me as the strongest and the most candid, and the most potent, and the most willing to risk backlash come from two people. Dolphins coach Brian Flores and Raiders owner Mark Davis. And we'll start with the Flores statement that came out on Friday, and it was powerful. I've had the privilege of being a part of many different circles that have included some very powerful and influential people of all different races and genders. I vividly remember the Colin Kaepernick conversations. Don't ever disrespect the flag was the phrase that I heard over and over again. This idea that players were kneeling in support of social justice was something some people couldn't wrap their head around. I bring these situations up because I haven't seen the same outrage from people of influence when the conversation turns to Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and most recently, George Floyd. Many people who broadcast their opinions on kneeling or on the subject of hiring of minorities don't seem to have an opinion on the recent murders of these young black men and women. I think many of them quietly say that watching George Floyd plead for help is one of the most horrible things they've ever seen, but it's amongst themselves when no one can hear. Broadcasting that opinion clearly is not important enough. Strong juxtaposition and a stunning willingness of an NFL coach to break ranks. Not a single other coach has issued a statement. We've been monitoring, we've been checking, and if we're wrong, please let us know. But I've got a staff of 5, and we've all been all weekend long. Quarterbacks, coaches, owners, teams. When there's statements issued, let's get them, let's highlight them, and let's deal with the content of the statements. And Brian Flores had a powerful statement. Chris, you know Coach Flores. How does this statement fit with your own experience of dealing with and working with him?
Well, you said stunning willingness, and that's something that I look at and go, no, it's not stunning when you know Brian Flores, and I know you've gotten a chance to meet him a few times too, Mike, and you could tell he's a no-nonsense guy. Whatever the challenge is, he takes it head on. And, this is a guy that has been through a lot in his life, grew up in one of the toughest areas in the whole country. So he's seen some of these issues firsthand. And yeah, I mean, this is the kind of leadership that I think is needed from coaches and people in high positions in our society right now. Yes, as an African-American man, I think he's outraged a little bit by, some of the silence or, lack of important voices out there that are clamoring like they were in his release statement about Colin Kaepernick or other issues. Where are those voices now? But Flores, an unbelievable leader. You'll always know where he stands. He's a man's man, and he wants to do right by all people. And I'm sure this hits home in a lot of ways because he's experienced it firsthand in a lot of ways, not himself, but maybe just seeing it and growing up around it. And of course, he's a guy that wants a better place for his children and his players and everything else like that. So nobody with a right common, a sense of mind, right sense of mind, would want to see the actions and things, and especially the George Floyd murder and everything like that over this past week. It was horrible. So he took time to write a really nice little statement there to kind of let everybody know where he stands. Sorry, I'm blabbering there.
And I use the word stunning because there are 31 other NFL head coaches who haven't said a word. No statements issued by any of them. And, in the college ranks, there was some criticism being lobbed at the coaches for not saying anything. And it's almost like they all felt like, well, we got to do it. And look, I don't want to take anything away from the statements that are made because they're doing what they had to do, or at least what they feel like they had to do. But no one followed suit with Brian Flores over the weekend. Now, we may see more of it today and into this week, but it makes it stunning to me because it's one of 32, and it's the only one. And the willingness to say, hey, all these people who have a problem with a peaceful protest during the national anthem, which wasn't about disrespecting the military, the police, the flag, the country. It was about bringing attention to the problem of police brutality against African Americans and people of color. Those people who were up in arms, those people who had loud opinions about Kaepernick, don't have loud opinions about the murder of George Floyd. Now, a loud opinion about the murder of George Floyd comes from Raiders owner Mark Davis. This is a fairly new statement. He's one of only a small handful of owners who have issued statements. Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons, Jed York, the CEO of the 49ers, and now Mark Davis. And this one is powerful, and it's written as a poem, The Murder of George Floyd. And I credit Mark Davis for calling this what it is. It is a murder. It was a murder. Some people have been tiptoeing around it. Anybody who's seen that video knows that George Floyd was murdered. Whatever degree, that's for the legal system to figure out. He was murdered. To watch a man be murdered by a uniformed police officer kneeling on the man's throat for 9 minutes, while 3 uniformed police officers either assisted or stood by watching, is disturbing in too many ways, Davis writes. To be honest, I'm surprised that the resulting violence hasn't been much worse. I'm going to stop right there. That is a strong statement. Now, some will say, oh, he's inciting more violence. No, he's not. He's reflecting his own view, Chris. He's surprised it hasn't been worse than it has. It's been bad. And a lot of people have asked me over the weekend, well, why is the rioting happening? I think it's a complicated stew of people and motivations.
A lot of things.
And you've got people who are genuinely protesting. They don't know what else to do because they've tried and they've tried and they've tried to get justice and they can't. So at some point, the fuse hits the bomb. Then you've got people who are trying to take advantage of the situation for their own personal gain, and they're looting. You've got people who are trying to spark greater unrest, who are coming in and instigating, and it's all kind of combined into one gigantic mess that is spread basically from coast to coast. But Mark Davis's willingness, and I didn't read the whole thing, I wanted to read the part that was the most impactful to me, calling it what it is, a murder, and using the phrase, to be honest, I'm surprised that the resulting violence hasn't been much worse. That is a wow. That is a major wow when you consider the way NFL owners think and the way the NFL operates. And you got to wonder how some owners are going to receive this and how the league office is going to receive it. Because, look, again, it's not inciting violence. It's not really excusing violence. It's just making the statement, I'm surprised it hasn't been worse. It's been bad. He's surprised it hasn't been worse. And I think some other people may share that belief.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of people. I mean, again, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I would have been like horrified if it was worse either. I mean, I understand what Mark Davis is trying to say. First off, I think it's great leadership in what he showed in this statement. I do. And yes, I mean, African-American people, people of color in general, they have a right to be upset. Yeah, they felt like for a long time voices have gone unheard, complaints and issues that they've complained about and have tried to bring to the attention of society have kind of just been swept under the rug time after time after time. So, yes, right now we're seeing that boiling point, like you said, a stew of a bunch of things. But, again, what Brian Flores releases, powerful statement. And then I do think when you get into a guy like Mark Davis, again, a white, really wealthy man making a statement and kind of drawing a line in the sand this way too, that's every bit as powerful to have somebody like that come out and make those statements and show the African-American community that he understands what they're going through, and he understands their anger and why they're having, why we're having these protests and outbursts right now throughout the country.
The league office also has issued a statement on the matter. It came from Commissioner Roger Goodell on Saturday. The NFL family is greatly saddened by the tragic events across our country. The protesters' reactions to these incidents reflect the pain, anger, and frustration that so many of us feel. There remains an urgent need for action. We recognize the power of our platform in communities and as part of the fabric of American society. We embrace that responsibility and are committed to continuing the important work to address these systemic issues together with our players, clubs, and partners. Perfectly appropriate message to be sent, but the problem is Colin Kaepernick hovers over this entire issue when you consider it from the perspective of the National Football League, because it was nearly 4 years ago that he began his protests, not with the aim to disrespect the flag, the nation, the military, the police, or anyone. His goal was to bring attention to this issue, to this specific problem that we are now trying to figure out how to properly confront: the treatment of African Americans and people of color by the police. This is exactly why he did what he did. He had a very eloquent explanation at his locker after this all first happened. And the thing that struck me, his comparison of in California, the number of hours of training and schooling and education and experience you need before you get a badge versus the number of hours of training and schooling and education and experience you need before you can cut someone's hair. And it's a remarkable difference. As in, you got to have a lot more time with scissors and a blow dryer in your hand before you get a license to cut hair than you have with a gun in your hand and other potentially lethal force in your hand before you get a badge. That, to me, still resonates 4 years later. That's the kind of thing that he was trying to project. But the problem is there were so many people who are upset with the way he communicated the message that the message got lost. And, you know, what I said then, Chris, and what I'll still say now, you have limited opportunities to get your point across during a football game. When are you going to do it? When do you have a chance to get people's attention, to bring people's attention to something, right? You're not going to deliberately, fall down during a play and say, I did that so the world would pause for a moment and pay attention to this issue I'm trying to bring light to. There's a limited window to use that platform, and he used it. And again, people got so caught up in attacking the messenger in the way that he was projecting the message that we never really got to the message. This is it. And again, that's why it's inextricable from this moment. People are like, why are you still talking about the guy? Because that memory and that message, the core message, not what you want to think the message is, the core message of the treatment of African Americans and people of color by police, we're seeing the consequences
it's still
of
a relevant
not having that addressed. Here's what happened. If George Floyd doesn't get murdered last week, we're not going through any of this stuff right now.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
agreed.
Not that would have been. Look, there's still a problem that needed to be addressed, and maybe we were just one more death away from it exploding. But that's the point. It's the buildup of years and years and years of this kind of thing, and this was the one that provided the tipping point, and Kaepernick was trying to get our attention to it before it hit the tipping point 4 years ago, Chris.
Well, yeah, he was, and sadly enough, it's a very relevant conversation still, and we see it a few times a year at least. So yes, I mean, what Colin Kaepernick was fighting for, Mike, you and I have talked about this a million times. We're all in. We're in the fight with him. There's no doubt. I mean, we support everything that he stood for. I've talked about it on the show many times before too. Just my experience as being a quarterback in the NFL. Listen, I've seen some of these social injustices in person and things like that. They are real. It is very commonplace in our country. So yes, people of color, they feel like they're over-policed and over-scrutinized and over-jailed. And of course, not treated the same way as a white American is when it comes to dealing with the police. And it's not all across the board. And I'm very sensitive to what policemen have to go through. I know it's not an easy job, but man, it's not easy being African American in this country right now too. And especially with a lot of the horror stories that we've come across the last few years, and being African American, dealing with the police and all that. Of course, they're going to be nervous in those type of situations right now with the current state in our country. And it's scary. It is. But it's good to see people in position, players over the weekend. We saw, a few owners. We'd like to see more coaches come out and support of especially African-American people and people of color all across the country. And even more importantly, just because, hey, we're in a sport where we play we're in the NFL, it's primarily African-American. And a lot of the guys and people we know in the sport and coaching have had to deal with a lot of these issues, and they've seen it firsthand. So it's very sensitive and real, and it's sad. It really is, and it's going to take a little while for our nation and people to heal from this.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.